These 10-year-old girls at Sephora are crazy, but what's crazier are the parents that aren't parenting.
We tried to warn you that the iPad generation Gen Alpha was getting out of hand. As a Gen Z who worked in childcare for about 8 to 9 years and has many younger relatives and attempted to get into education, their behavior has been driving even lifelong teachers who have been teaching 20, 30 years out of their careers because of how awful they are to manage. And now we're starting to see them enter the real world and participating in things in society outside of just the classroom and daycare. And I want to talk about it today because yes, one of the big things that I've always blamed for it is this big gentle parenting movement that people confuse for permissive parenting, so they do it all wrong. And like a lot of stories we've seen this week, we're just seeing kids run amok, destroying things now. Because a lot of people who gentle parent think that no is a bad word. But today I actually want to talk about 2 of the best parenting tips or styles that I saw consistently amongst all of the best behaved children that I ever nannied. And obviously good parenting and good children come from a number of different things. But these 2 are really big ones, I think. And to clarify, Generation Alpha are kids who were born between 2010 roughly and 2024. And the first generation iPad didn't drop until 2010, but they weren't like really all that popular if I recall and like super accessible until 2012, 2013-ish. Which as a Gen Z, I was already in my teen years around that time, so no, most of Gen Z were not iPad babies. The first and most obvious one is really limiting screen times, and I don't mean no screens at all, until they're like 13, 14. Because yes, our generation had a lot of unregulated screen time growing up, but it was always limited to like that big desktop computer at the home. So you had to be at home to be using it, and even then my mom would yell at us to get off after a while. Now, this doesn't mean no screen time because there are both positive and negative impacts of screen media usage for young children. It's essential in our society, right? But excessive screen time they're seeing is leading to a lot of like cognitive ability issues. And I think especially problems in social and emotional development, but anything in excess is bad. The best approaches I saw for it was like every day they would get 30 or 40 minutes of screen time in the evening kind of as a reward for doing homework and to wind down at the end of the day. Once or twice a week, that would be replaced by like a family movie night. And then of course on the weekends, they kind of had unlimited access, but it was still kind of limited. Like if they were on it too long, then parents would be like, get outside. And I also like that once the kids hit kind of like 14, like the older kids kind of had more access because again, playing video games online with your friends and stuff towards that age becomes more important from a social standpoint. And the second approach I think we see, especially with these Sephora and Ulta stories, is like letting your kid be a kid and actually like encouraging and kind of making them stay a kid, if that makes sense. Because sadly, in recent years, we are seeing a real disappearance of this whole tween phase, which is that time between ages 10 to 13 where you shouldn't be considered a teenager yet because you're still kind of a kid. And interestingly enough, there's actually studies on how important these years are. And my favorite little girls that I nannied who were like 11 or 12 really embraced and celebrated these tween years. They looked and behaved appropriately their age. And it's because of their parents and the parenting. And I like this article a lot. I relate to it because my parents did the same thing. To a reasonable degree, how you dress and like your free time is very managed by your parents. My favorite kids were put in a lot of sports and age-appropriate activities, and they really weren't allowed to own makeup. And the clothing that they bought was very age-appropriate. And mind you, all little girls might have a slight inclination towards makeup just because of societal pressures, sadly. But the makeup they owned was kind of like maybe a tinted chapstick or some glitter, something fun and age-appropriate, not like rare beauty. I remember my first real item of makeup I received when I was 12. Because my mom always took me into Sephora with her, so I wanted something from Sephora too, of course, because I wanted to be like my mother. And this old brand that doesn't seem to exist at Sephora anymore called Chubby Bunny, which kind of was more playfully and you could say kind of more kid-directed almost, had released this Hello Kitty line that I saw when I was in there with her one day that I became obsessed with. And so for my birthday that year, my mother got me the Hello Kitty perfume, which was a very light floral. She got me the Hello Kitty brush set just because it was like a big chunky Hello Kitty and I could like play with the brushes and pretend. And then she got me like a little tinted Hello Kitty chapstick. And it was like real adult makeup that was like definitely kid friendly. And that's all I had for many years, of course. It's not like I was buying NARS or Fenty at 12. There's just so many studies about how important it is to keep and celebrate these tween years in children. And I feel like somehow entitlement ties into that a lot because all the kids who really celebrated their tween years were just like so much better behaved and I loved watching them so much more than the kids that were buying like Lululemon and Fenty.